Have you ever had this experience where you're at the playground with your kids and they're having an amazing time? They're just having so much fun. And then when it's time to go, they have a complete meltdown, right? They're screaming or they're crying or they're holding on to the playground equipment and you have to kind of pull them off of it. And invariably, when that happens, we will say, or we'll hear a parent say, well, if that's how you're going to act when it's time to leave, I'm not going to bring you back. The parents become very frustrated and angry. The kids end up being shamed. And what was a wonderful experience turns out in the end to be a train wreck. Hi everybody, this is Greg from Heart Tools, where we make it simple to build great relationships. And the key to understanding what's going on in these moments where you have to leave the playground, or it's time to stop playing the favorite video game, or stop watching their favorite TV show, or it's time for their friend to leave and go home, whatever it is. The key to understanding that is to understand your child is not acting spoiled and selfish. What they're doing is grieving. And if you can understand that, then what can happen in those moments is that amazing memory at the playground can stay an amazing memory. You can stay connected with your kids on the way home, and you will have a critical opportunity to help them to develop in one of the most important ways you can help your kids develop. Now, I'm sure you've heard about the 5 stages of grief. They're pretty well known, but let's walk through one of those typical experiences through the lens of the 5 stages of grief, right? The first stage is denial, and that's when you're telling your kids it's time to go home and they just ignore you because they can't believe you're actually going to end such an amazing experience. The second stage of grief is bargaining, and that's when your kids say, can't I stay 10 more minutes? Can't I go down the slide 2 more times? They start bargaining, right? The third stage of grief is anger, and that's when your kids start, screaming, yelling, throwing maybe a little bit of a temper tantrum, meltdown. The fourth stage is depression, and that's when they get quiet and get ready to do the fifth stage, which is accepting the fact that they're leaving, and that's where the real tears begin. That is a normal process for human hearts to go through when we have to let go of something that we love. And so your kids in those moments aren't being selfish. They're actually acting perfectly normal. And in fact, it's unavoidable for your kids to go through the process of needing to learn how to grieve things that they love. And that's what their little hearts are doing. Their little hearts are going, I don't have a whole lot of experience of letting go of something I love. And that's the process that they're going through. And in those moments, when your children are grieving like that, on a small scale, to be sure, but for them, it doesn't feel small, right? Because it's so new to them. In those moments, you have 2 choices. The first choice is you can, what we call, bury their heart, right? You can shut down their emotion, you can shame their emotion, and tell them to stop feeling so sad, stop feeling so selfish. And what you're really communicating to them in that moment is, don't love something so much that you're sad when you have to let it go, right? Because that's the only 2 options we have. We can either love something and then be sad when it's gone, or we can not love something so that we're not sad. And the only way to avoid these moments is to create a child who just doesn't get excited about things. And that's not what we want for our children, right? And so the second option in those moments is to say, oh, here's an opportunity to excavate my child's heart. Here's an opportunity to teach them how to live with their heart fully alive. And so we're going to stay connected. We're going to empathize with their sadness or their anger or whatever they're expressing because they're going through the grief curve, right? And it can go fairly quickly, but there's a lot of emotions there. Empathize and validate their emotion. That's the first part. Stay connected by listening well, empathizing, and validating. The second important thing to do, though, is not interrupt the grief process, right? Let them get to the end. A lot of times what happens is we don't let them get to the end where they can just accept the fact that they're grieving. And if you can know in your own mind, here's what I'm doing. I'm staying connected. Eventually, they're going to move through this. And if you do that, you will probably be surprised how quickly in the car they've moved through the grief, they've let go of that, and they're ready to get excited about the next thing because you haven't had this big blow up where, you shame them and they feel misunderstood and you still feel connected. Now, let me say something about the bargaining phase because it is okay and often quite helpful in that phase to offer a compromise and say, hey, do you want to stay 5 more minutes, right? Something that's age appropriate because you don't want your kids always to feel powerless in their relationship with you. You want to start giving them a little bit of power. And so it's got to be age appropriate, right? So on the playground, it can be, hey, sure, we can stay 5 more minutes and then we're going to leave. And then when they're teenagers, you can still compromise. Hey, do you want to mow the lawn today or do you want to mow it tomorrow? The choice is yours. So you can offer compromises, but offer one compromise, right? You don't want to offer 10 compromises. And as they learn to grieve, right, what will happen is they will take that 5 minutes of compromise to adjust the fact that it's time to go. They won't do that right away. But later on, that's what will happen is they'll use that time to get ready to let go. So offer a compromise that's age appropriate to your child, and that's okay. And then the same dynamic will happen as, kind of leaving the playground. The same thing will happen when you're going through the store and your kid asks you, can I buy this toy? Can we get this box of cereal? And you say no, and they kind of lose it. And it's really a similar thing happening when you say no because in their hearts, they've already fallen in love with that toy, right? They can already picture themselves at home playing it. They already see themselves eating that box of cereal that they've been watching TV commercials for all week long, right? And so when you say, no, you can't do that, they still have to grieve the idea of that. And it's the same thing, right? Don't shame them. Empathize. Yeah, I get sad when I can't have the things I want. That sure makes sense. But let them finish the grieving process. And if you can do this, if you can shift your mindset to this is a character issue, because my kids are just so selfish, to this is a developmental issue because my kids need to learn how to hear no and how to grieve, and that's hard for all of us, then what can happen in those moments is you can still have a great time and still create a great memory. You can stay connected with your kids, and you have an incredible moment where you go, oh, here's a good chance to help them learn how to grieve, help them learn how to hear no, because those are 2 things that are critical to do if you want to live with your heart alive and be a successful adult. Help them, don't interrupt them and let them go through the grief process, right? So here's what you can practice with this. The first is practice being aware of when your kids are grieving, right? When it's time to leave. You might even know if you're at the playground that, okay, I'm going to say it's time to go, and they're going to grieve, right? So practice being aware of that, and then practice in those moments staying connected with them, empathizing, validating, even though your no stay strong. And sometimes what happens is you empathize with someone and their emotions get bigger, right? That's because they're living with their heart alive, right? And that's okay. So stay connected, empathize and validate in that moment, but let them finish the grief process. Don't interrupt. Stay connected, stay loving and caring until they finish grieving, and you'll be surprised how quickly they're ready to move on to the next thing. Simple steps, practice, practice, practice. That's what Heart Tools is all about.